Welcome back, animal lovers, to Awakening with Your Animal Family. I'm Dr. Alan Schoen, your host of Awakening Your Animal Family. And I'm really excited today about introducing you to our very special guest, Dr. Gerald Pollack. In my efforts and goal to educate and empower you as animal lovers about what you can do to keep your animals as healthy and happy as possible and how to deepen the human-animal bond, we've talked about nutrition. We've talked about many of the foundations of animal health, light medicine, oxygen medicine, all these things that complement conventional veterinary medicine, not to replace them. Well, today we're going to be talking about the healing power of water. Now, many of you would go like, what? Water is water. Well, you're about to find out so much more about water than you probably ever even knew that you wanted to know. And if you want, after this episode, if you want to watch even more, I was very impressed with a recent documentary called The Secret of Water, where Dr. Pollack was featured. And anything on water, Dr. Pollack is featured, because I'm like so honored and touched and feel so blessed that we can have Dr. Pollack on this show, because I've been a huge fan of Dr. Pollack for well over 20 years. When I first started teaching on the scientific basis of acupuncture based on the liquid crystalline collagen continuum theory of acupuncture and fascia, I came across one of Dr. Pollack's numerous books, Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life, a new unifying approach to cell function. Well, you can see from all the little tabs on here what a big fan I was. There was so much great information in here. And when Dr. Pollack agreed to be on this show, I can't tell you how thrilled I was. So this is all part of my goal of educating, empowering you. And in the midst of this pandemic and everything that's going on, at the end of the show, Dr. Pollack will be sharing his insights and wisdom about the healing power of water and what it can be done in the midst of this pandemic for both you and your animal friends. So it's my great honor to introduce Dr. Pollack. Dr. Pollack is a professor at the University of Washington in biomedical engineering. And he graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. He received his PhD back in 1968. And between then and now, we could spend the entire show just talking about all the awards and accolades of everything that he's achieved. And it just blows my mind, really, when he sent me and goes an abbreviated bio. And I'm like, oh my God. So I just want to share with you a few of them so you can appreciate how blessed we are to have him on the show. Okay. So just as soon as recently as 2019, Dr. Pollack was acknowledged as one of the world's 100 most inspiring people. So that's who we're going to be listening to today. It's one of the world's 100 most inspiring people. And he's won numerous awards. He has books, the one I showed you, Cells, Gels, and Engines of Life. And his latest book is called The Fourth Phase of Water, which is what he'll be discussing today about. And he's received endless awards and honorary PhD. He's the founder of the Journal of Water. And he actually won the Brand Laureate Award that's bestowed on really quite famous people, such as Steve Jobs and Nelson Mandela. And just in 2016, he was actually awarded the Emoto Inaugural Peace Prize. And if any of you are aware or not aware of Dr. Emoto, I'm sure we'll be discussing that today too. And he's received numerous Lifetime Achievement Awards. So I'm a huge fan, and I feel so blessed to have him. And I'd just like to welcome you, Dr. Pollack. And thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with all these animal lovers.
Oh, well, thank you, Alan, and you're too kind. And I appreciate the invitation to be here and to talk about water, which is, I guess, my favorite topic. So
great.
Let's proceed.
Okay, yeah. So for our animal lovers, most of them probably just know water is water. Can you give a brief synopsis of your research, your insights, and what you've discovered about water and the importance of that in life and with our animals and us?
Sure, I'm happy to do so. So most of us, myself included, we grew up learning that there are three phases of water: solid, liquid, and vapor. And I think most of us presume that that's correct. We found that this is not correct, that there's actually a fourth phase of water. And the fourth phase is not just a laboratory curiosity, it actually fills our bodies. And so it's really important to understand and know about it. And I gotta say at the outset that this is not a radical idea at all. 100 years ago, even more than 100 years ago, it was about 105 years ago, there's a famous colloid chemist who was interested in the subject of water. And famous guy because he has a Sir before his name, Sir William Hardy. So, you know, he must be, with a Sir before his name, he must be very important. Anyway, he said that, he said, we know there are three phases of water, but if we examine those three phases, they can't explain some of the things that we observe. And by that time, 100 years ago, there was a list of, excuse me, a list of observations that coronavirus, maybe, a list of observations that simply couldn't be explained. And he said, well, I think there must be a fourth phase between the liquid and a solid. Excuse me. And that idea perpetuated over the years. And what I'm getting to is that this is not original with me. One of the people who emphasized that is Albert St. Georgi, which I think most of your audience probably never heard of, but he won a Nobel Prize. He discovered vitamin C. He was interested in cancer. He was interested in water. And one of his famous statements was, life is water dancing to the tune of solids. So he thought that the water was centrally involved in everything that happens in life, and also a believer in what I mentioned earlier, that there must be some other phase of water. And the person who really brought that to light is a guy named Gilbert Ling. By the way, Gilbert died just shy of 100 years old. And he wrote, I think, 6 books or 7 books, and most of them had to do with water, and had to do with water that's inside your cells and inside your body. And he said that the water inside your body is nothing like water in a glass. It's different. In water in a glass, ordinary liquid water, the molecules are bouncing around innumerable per second and randomly oriented. And he said, no, the evidence suggests that it's not like that at all, that the water molecules are lined up inside your cells, just like soldiers at attention, lined up in that way. And that's where we got our start. I met Gilbert Ling 25 years ago, approximately, at a conference. And I was really impressed by what he had to say, and also by the people who seemed to have evidence to support his point of view. I was really intrigued. So I gave one of his books to a bunch of my students and postdocs in my laboratory, and I asked them to have a look. And they came back to me, and uniformly they said, this guy is onto something really, really important. And I thought so myself, but I was just maybe looking for confirmation from my intelligent students who were maybe smarter than I was. I wanted to see what they had to say. And they all said, this is really important stuff. So my next goal was to write a book. And the book is the first one that you showed. It's called Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life. And in the book originally, my intention was to try to make Gilbert Ling's ideas accessible to, for example, the people who are now listening. And I think I may have succeeded in that, because a lot of people told me that the material was quite accessible. But I went on beyond that to suggest, to examine the evidence, and from the evidence to suggest that not only is the water inside your cells, as Gilbert Ling said, structured or ordered, but also it plays an absolutely fundamental role in everything that your cells do. That was new, because most of us are educated to think that, or at least, I mean, the people who were studying biology were educated to think that water is nothing more than the background carrier of the more important molecules of life, like proteins and DNA and such. And the book took that to task and suggests not true at all, that everything that the cells do, the most fundamental attributes or functions of the cell, that water played an integral role. And I think Gilbert Ling didn't really like all that I presented so much, because I think it maybe stole some of his thunder. But of course, we got interested, and or I got interested. And at that time, I decided to convert the entire laboratory from what we used to study, which was the molecular mechanism of muscle contraction, to water, because water seemed so compellingly important for everything in life and even beyond life. And that's where we got started. So we found, shall I go on, or do you want to ask another question? Because as you wish.
Yeah, so with that, what I've been reading, and when I teach on the liquid crystal collagen continuum and the importance of the fourth phase of water, from my understanding, what you're saying in the evidence is showing that water is part of a bioelectrical, biochemical communication system throughout the entire body.
Yeah.
If you could elaborate on that a bit.
Let me explain. Okay, so I need to give some background. If you have a liquid crystal, just kind of like what Gilbert Ling was suggesting, in that the molecules are all lined up, what you expect in liquid crystals, or any crystals, just like ice, for example, when ice forms, it pushes out all of the junk that happened to be in the water, because otherwise you couldn't get a pure crystal. You have to get rid of everything, so it excludes it. And so we began our experiments by looking for a situation where we could see that particles were excluded. And that's how we started, and that's how we began discovering this fourth phase of water. We found that from a hint by a Japanese colleague. We found that if we took a gel and put the gel in the water, and we added to the water some little particles, we used microspheres, that is, little spheres that were 1 micrometer, very tiny spheres. And we found that right next to the gel, that the spheres were excluded, and we thought, they're excluded because this is the liquid crystal that's right next to the gel. And we began, after some time, after we found more evidence, calling this region the exclusion zone, because it excludes. So it's very simple. And then later we began calling the water that's inside the zone a fourth phase of water, because it's different from any of the phases of water that you have. So what are its properties? And so the first is that the water, when it meets the surface, like a gel surface, or any, or I should say most surfaces that have a hydrophilic nature, hydrophilic meaning they love water, which means that if you have one of these surfaces sitting on the table and you pour some water, the water spreads out. Unlike, for example, Teflon, where the water beads up, that's hydrophobic. So we found that most surfaces, most hydrophilic surfaces, when the water meets the surface, the water undergoes a chemical transition. It's no longer H2O, it's H3O2. And H3O2 appears in sheets, honeycomb sheets. So one sheet forms next to the gel or hydrophilic surface, then the next one forms on top of that, and then the next one, and so on. And so it forms these honeycomb sheets, hexagonal sheets that pile one on top of another. Typically they have negative charge. They're not neutral as H2O is. They have negative charge, and then beyond this this zone, this EZ or exclusion zone, is ordinary water, where the sheets have not yet built or don't exist, and they have the opposite charge. They have positive charge. So what happens is that you have a situation after some build-up time, which is usually a matter of minutes. You have a negatively charged zone, which is the fourth phase, and a positively charged zone beyond it, which means that you have a battery. You see, and this is really interesting. If you pardon me for one sec, my cat is very anxious to leave. I'll be back in a moment, okay?
Absolutely, your cat is very interested in what you're saying to animal lovers. Yeah, so what Dr. Pollack is sharing is that water, when it's in our body, it's actually a different phase and it's structured. And from what I understand, the evidence is that as it's structured and connected, that it actually forms a form of biocommunication through the body. And actually, if I'm correct, maybe you can elaborate on this, actually has memory and is one of the stores of memory in the body.
Yeah, this is a really interesting story. This structure that, well, first of all, let me back up, and if I forget the questions, remind me. I have a habit of doing that. See, in order to build a structure like this, or build any kind of ordered structure, you need energy, and it struck us. We couldn't figure out where the energy was coming from. You know, obviously you can't plug this into the receptacle in your wall and like that. And we finally figured out through some quirks of a student who was doing something that he wasn't supposed to do, but his result was really interesting. We found it was light that did it, and not just ordinary light, but mostly infrared light. Infrared light, most people don't really know about infrared light. We think we turn on the electric range and we look inside and it's hot and it's glowing, and we say, well, it's generating infrared energy. But infrared energy or light is all over the place. If you were to darken your room and whip out a night light or an infrared camera, completely dark, you can't see anything, but the camera will record, the infrared sensor in the camera will record the image of everything in the field. So the military uses it to detect the enemy at night. It's handy for those things and for many others. So it's there all the time. This energy is being radiated by everything, and therefore this water that I'm talking about is always there. In your body, the energy can come from metabolism, which generates heat, which is essentially infrared energy, which builds this kind of water. And that's one of the reasons why it builds in your body. You could also use an infrared lamp on your body. Some of the wavelengths of infrared go through and build easy water inside your body. Okay, so we know that at least infrared energy can build this water, but there are all kinds of energies probably that we have not discovered yet that seem to build this kind of energy. So now we have energetically built the layers that I was talking about of easy water, and these layers, as I mentioned, they're honeycomb sheets, and the atoms of hydrogen and oxygen are fixed. That's why it's a liquid crystal. They're fixed at fixed locations, and one is piled upon the other. So you wind up with a three-dimensional array where the oxygens and hydrogens are in specific positions. You see, and this is not unlike a computer memory where the silicon atoms are in three-dimensional arrays that are and each each atom has two different states, right? And one we call a 0, the other we call a 1, and it stores information in memory. And because the easy water has a similar structure, you can surmise that it might have the capability of storing information. And that's where it all starts, you see. It turns out that it's not, each oxygen has not 2 states, but 5 different states. That is oxidation states of -2, -1, 0, +1, and +2. So if this easy water has a capability of storing information, for which we have evidence now, other people have come up with evidence, the capacity for information storage is absolutely huge. We're talking about like 7 or 8 orders of magnitude more than a computer memory. And by the way, this is a liquid crystal, but actually we're able to solidify it, make it solid at room temperature. We're not the first. Italian group did it first, Vittorio Elia in Naples, but we've confirmed it in our laboratory, and you can get this as a sort of powder. This is easy water that's a solid at room temperature. So the idea of eventually using it as a computer memory is possible, although we haven't yet figured out the input and output and how to manage that. So your question is, well, gee, this is pretty interesting, maybe, but is there any evidence that this easy water, or any water for that matter, really can store information? And the answer is yes. And I'll just give a few examples if you like. Well,
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So examples. I'm sorry, my cat now wants in. So I'm going to give you examples, but.
Yeah, that's what cats do. They train us well. Yeah. And what we're getting at here is the water in our body has memory. And with that, we'll continue on your.
So there are subtle of energies that have the capacity then to be imparted to this water, and it changes the water, and therefore the water will store information. And it's possible that that information can even be extracted. So it starts with a Russian scientist named Gurevich, 70 or 80 years ago, who had the idea that plants were communicating with one another. So he took 2 onion plants and he put them close to one another. And in the roots of these onion plants, the cells are undergoing mitosis, they're dividing. And of course, one plant will do it at its own rate and another plant will do it at its rate. But when you put them together, near each other, not together, but near, then they begin to synchronize. And so he thought, well, this is pretty interesting. If they're synchronizing, there must be some signal going from one to the other. And he thought it was an optical signal of some sort. And he tested this putting barriers between the 2 plants. And so first he put glass, and the communication was just as though nothing was there. And then he put quartz, similar to glass, but it passes different wavelengths or blocks certain wavelengths. And then the communication ceased. And so with the cessation of that communication, he said, what's different between quartz and glass? And quartz doesn't pass UV light. And so he said that probably the cell goes from one to the other could be ultraviolet light. That's where it all started. And then there was the late Jacques Benveniste, a Frenchman of great esteem, but he suffered horribly from the editor-in-chief of the famous journal Nature, this is slight digression for a few minutes, or do you want me to skip that and continue on?
Well, I followed Dr. Benveniste's sad story with that. And essentially, what he, if I understand correctly, in the publication, and I read it and I was so excited about it, he documented that that water has memory.
Yeah.
And that nature didn't want to hear about that. After they published it, they said, oh, wait a minute, this is too controversial. And it kind of, in a way, documents homeopathy. And that's the last thing they wanted.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But I'll just add to that, that his work, his experimental results have been confirmed by many people to date. So it was clear that he was right, and that there had to be, in order for his experiments to be explained, there had to be some kind of memory in the water. And he told me that he made a mistake by calling it water memory, because that's like a red flag in front of a bull. You know, people react to that in a way that is maybe not so kind. So the more just to cite a few more pieces of evidence, and you know, each year I'm the organizer of the annual conference on the physics, chemistry, and biology of water. It's now held in Germany, and lots of people invite people to give their talks, and there are always 2 or 3 people who are talking about memory of water. So I'll just tell you about one. His name is Kernbach, German investigator. He's engineering oriented, and he has some water sitting in his laboratory, and he measures the properties of water using measuring complex conductivity. The method is it's called impedance spectroscopy, but it's not so important. Anyway, what is important is that he can measure some physical properties of water. And then his experiment is he asked someone from a distant country, for example, from New Zealand, 10,000 kilometers away. He said, at a door, please put your intention, water that's in my laboratory. And the guy does it from 10,000 kilometers distant. And he makes a measurement of the water before the intention and after the intention, and they're grossly different. So on this method, the water has changed its physical properties based on some intention sent from some distance. This is phenomenal. This is something, and it's actually prompted us to begin experiments. We're only starting to do that to check to see whether, for example, healers who are known to be able to, well, heal, and whether the presence of healers next to the water changes the physical properties of water. And we have 5 different methods, independent methods, to check to see what's going on. But I think what you're after is Emoto, as you mentioned that earlier. And this is maybe the most famous example of putting intention in water. So what Emoto, who passed about 4 years ago, but now the work is going on in Office Emoto in Tokyo, and there are people, including the son of Emoto, who are guiding the effort. And Emoto became famous. He was a physician, also a spiritualist, and he used what made him famous is using technique that he invented, I guess, and that is to take some water. And the water, he would focus his intention on the water. Actually, I think the earlier experiment was sound. He would play sound to the water, but later it was his intention. He would, for example, he would think or state, "I love you," to the water, and then he would freeze the water, and he did it by taking individual droplets of water, putting it in a dish, a petri dish, put it in the freezer, taking it out after it's frozen and examining in the microscope, and he could look at the crystals, with the crystals of ice that formed. And what he found was that if he said, I love you, for example, to the crystal, to the water, the crystals would be beautiful. And if he said, I hate you, or something like that, or you fool, or something of this, he'd get ugly crystals. He was, or he continues to be criticized by many people in the scientific community because the way he collected data was not objective and scientific. He would tendency to cherry pick the examples that best prove his point. Nevertheless, there were some studies that were done more objectively that found that really there was a statistically significant difference between the two. But he could get some beautiful images just by focusing his intention on the water. And so that, you know, that leads to the concept that you are receiving energy from me, maybe. For example, we're some distance apart. Salt's Island and Seattle are not that far apart, but it's possible that we're communicating in this kind of ineffable manner, and that when someone is extending love to their pet, for example, the pet is, or feeling the love, and the pet is receiving this some way and storing the information inside of her that's inside of the cells of the pet. So this can have a, you know, if the experiments are right, this can have an appreciable impact on the pet, or on anyone, on you, on me, and even maybe on listeners. So love really matters. And if putting out negative vibes, negative intention, it's possible that your animal can receive it. So the health of a person, of an animal, can depend very, very readily on what kind of subtle energies are being received. That's what our experiments imply, anyway. Just one more before your next question. I can see you're eager. Is Luc Montagnier? I don't know. So Luc Montagnier won the, I think, 2013 or 2009 Nobel Prize for HIV, and he was a friend of the late Jacques Benveniste, and he was intrigued by the experiments of Jacques, and he began to take over. And now he's doing experiments on water, and particularly on the memory of water and how this impacts our bodies. By now, I guess you might say, class experiment. I got to tell you about it if you don't know, because it's really amazing. So he takes two containers. They're sealed, absolutely. They can't communicate with one another chemically. They can't exchange anything because of the seal of the containers. One of them contains DNA in water or in a solution. The other one is pure water. He puts the two containers right next to each other for 24 hours. There's a little more than that, but basically for 24 hours. And he hypothesizes that the DNA, or the water surrounding the DNA, is sending out signals received by the water that's sitting next to that container of DNA. And he proves it by using that water to create new DNA and checking the sequence to see if it has the same sequence as the original DNA that the water was sitting next to. And it does. He uses the, well, it's a standard reaction to create DNA. And it's amazing because the sequence is really what matters in the DNA. And you'd think that it's impossible. There's no way, except for some kind of contamination, which he checked for. There's no way that we understand to get the information into the water that's used with the chemicals, the necessary chemicals to create the new DNA. So, and apparently his results seem to be confirmed by a couple of other Italian groups. This is amazing, you know. I mean, to think that. So, I mean, the bottom line is that by now, an appreciable number of people are interested, scientifically interested, in the idea that water can contain memory, and that you can impart information to the water, and it's well that the water can actually give out that information. The mechanism is not so clear, but the evidence is there that it happens.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Those are the most important experiments that show this amazing connection, what water can do in the world and how it holds it in ourselves, and our intention, that our intention, our thoughts of love, of destructive versus constructive thoughts impact not just on ourselves, but also in our animals. We create, what I've been calling in my last book, the trans-species field, that we create this field, and there are many different parts, components to how that's, with heart math and electromagnetic activity and everything. But that water is one of the key components, and that our intentions and how we feel impact on the field of our dogs, our cats, all of it. And so one can feel, go and say, oh my gosh, I want to feel guilty, I'm not putting out positive thoughts. But the flip side is, wow, by changing our own thoughts, by changing our own feelings, we can help create a more loving, compassionate field, not just with our own animals, but throughout the entire world, as you're saying, long distance. And this is starting to explain a lot of the more esoteric concepts of long distance healing. And all of it seems to be being documented and coming through water.
Yeah, I think it is, it reminds me of the transcendental meditate people. Are you familiar with those? Yeah,
yes,
so
and their
studies. They have a university in Iowa, I think it is. And I visited them for a few days several years back. And I visited them because I had some interest in what they do, a kind of levitation. That they don't call it that, but it kind of amounts to that, where they rise up and come down and rise up and come down and such. Only a foot or two or something like that, but they think it has to do somehow with some subtle energy. But from that, what I wanted to tell you is that they were telling me about experiments that they did where the energies of meditation were used to create peace. So one story was in Israel, it was 20 or 30 years ago, when there was a lot of strife going on, murders and all kind of, one of the intifadas that was occurring. And they decided that their collective meditation could be useful in creating peace where there was a lot of strife. And so they announced that they were going to go there on, I think it was December 1st, and they would leave on December 31st, or I forget the dates exactly. And they went there, many of them went there to meditate, and they meditated together in the same room. And they plotted the number of people meditating. I think they plotted at each hour for a full month. And you might imagine, sometimes there were a lot of people, sometimes there were fewer people, but they kept track of all that. And they announced ahead of time that they believed that during this month, that would be a lot less strife than was occurring more typically. So I looked at the report that they wrote finally. They were eminently successful. And if they showed a plot of the number of people meditating, and so it was 0 and it went up, and it had some inflections because people went sightseeing, and then it went down again. And then beneath that, they plotted from the number of incidents, violent incidents that occurred based on newspaper reports. And it was the exact inverse of that. It was some level, and then it went down on the 1st of December, and it's the same sort of oscillations that occurred in the number of people who were meditating. So the correlation between the two was amazing. Of course, after it was over, there was not much belief that this was real. But if you look at the evidence, which I did, it looked quite convincing. So again, we have a situation where some kind of subtle energy, which we don't understand very well, is having an impact on the population surrounding it. And they even were able to calculate, based on many such experiences, I think a half dozen they published in the same paper, the number of people who have to be doing this. So this radiates out from the core of people who are meditating, radiating out to a field, and they could calculate how big the field needs to be, how many people need to be meditating to cover a full field of, let's say, 50 miles or something like this. And of course, they're into creating peace around the world with a threshold number of people meditating. At the same time, they believe that they can create world peace. So if you ever ask them, if you ask the TM people, Transcendental Meditation people, what they think about creating world peace, their response will be, well, very simple. Just get enough people meditating and it will happen automatically. So it's pretty interesting. And I think it's another example of the kind of energy, and probably a lot of the water, because, we're mostly water, and 2/3 water. And if you interpret it, this 2/3 in terms of the number of molecules or the percent water molecules, if you line up all the molecules inside your body and start saying 1, 2, 3, you'll find that more than 99 out of 100 are water molecules, mainly because water molecules are small. And so to make up that 2/3 volume, you need a lot of them. And so more than 99% of the molecules in everyone's body are water molecules. So water molecules would seem to play an important role, not only in everything that the cell does, but also in what we're talking about in the memory of water. It's pretty interesting. It's a frontier.
And it's interesting, so many of the things you say. One of them is part of Awake TV's network. They've aligned with Deepak Chopra and Chopra Global. Yeah. And as part of this pandemic thing, they're having regular meditations with Deepak Chopra, who's part of the whole transcendental meditation movement, on meditating for world health and world peace as we're going through this. So it's synchronistic that you're bringing that up right now.
Well, how interesting. I hadn't realized that was happening. It's similar to, I don't know if you've read the book, or your listeners, The Power of 8 by Lynn McTaggart. This is a fascinating book. So, she knew about that collective meditation can cause healing, and she wondered how small the collection needs to be, how few. And she found out in her experiments that if you reduce the number from a very large number to even eight people focusing their intention on healing, it could be successful. And in the book, she provides evidence for that. And in fact, in my late wife, when she had cancer, and when she was not doing awfully well, we actually experienced this once a week. A bunch of loving people who I know from around the world did it by Zoom. We did this kind of healing, and I'm not sure if it helped or didn't help, but the hospice person who was here near the end said that for someone who was as near death as my wife was at the time, she was in the, quote, top 2 or 3%. And I said, well, what do you mean by top 2 or 3%? She's dying. And she said, well, it's true that she is. On the other hand, she's experiencing a lot less pain and suffering than most people who are in that late stage of cancer. So it might indeed have done something. And, again, we're talking about intention. And if we are to believe the results of Emoto and company, this intention is actually focused on the water, and it's the water inside our body that's actually doing this. So for me, all of this is fascinating.
Yeah, well, this is actually one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the show, is because one of the things that's unfolding from the show and on one of my missions with it is uniting animal lovers in a movement that I discussed in previous shows that I'm using the acronym CALM, C-A-L-M, for Conscious Animal Lovers Movement, because in my whole career as a veterinarian pioneering holistic integrative approaches, I said, wow, you know, what I see is when people are in touch with the love of their animals and the healing power of the love of animals, a whole other energy comes out of them. And I said, wouldn't it be awesome if we could unite and all of that and harness that healing power and love of animals from all animal lovers throughout the world, and that could go and really have a major impact, because it goes past the mind. When we're there, like your cat coming over and sitting with you during the show, they pick up and they're communicating at so many different levels with us that are nonverbal. And to me, from my research and studying, I feel like it's that memory in water that's part of that unifying field of consciousness between all beings. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show. And what I'm so pleased to have you here is because I think your work, and I hope and you deserve a Nobel Prize for all your work. And I anticipate that will happen at some point. But what you're doing is giving the foundation for this global intention, and specifically here on this show, of the love of animals, and love being such a strongly positive healing approach, harnessing that through water and through the interconnectedness of water throughout the planet, throughout the universe, as a potential for helping to bring a higher vibration to humanity and bringing a happier, healthier, more harmonious, creating a happier, healthier, more harmonious world. And to me, one of the things that it boils down to is the memory of water.
I couldn't agree with you more. And congratulations on forming that group. I don't know how successful you have been, or if this is just a dream, but it's a really interesting.
It's the beginning. I've had the intention, I've had the idea. And then when Awake TV invited me to have this show, I said, and it's only been, this is the 11th episode, so it is new, and it's a new creation that I'm inviting all animal lovers who are watching it to let me know, because it isn't me creating it. It's me, it's a co-creation of the healing power of love of all animal lovers to have this impact on the world.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool, really interesting, and supported by a lot of evidence, and that evidence is mushrooming into something really, really major.
One or two other questions. The time has just flown by, but there's so many companies out there that talk about products of structured water and drinking structured water and the importance of that. And from what I can see, most of them are doing that based on your research. Is there any sort of structured water products that you like, that you feel, oh, these are science-based and they might be a benefit to animal lovers for their animals and for themselves?
Well, this is a difficult question.
And if you don't want to, it's okay.
Yeah. No. I just explained. Yeah. So even if I did know which ones were the good ones, and I don't, it would be difficult for me to say, because if I'm pushing a product of some sort, it tends to destroy my independence. I'm a researcher. I'm not in a position to endorse a particular product, and so it's difficult. And even my own drinking, my wife said, people wanted to send me different devices and waters and whatever, and some did, and I refused them at first, and because I didn't want to drink a particular kind of water for fear that people found out might interpret that as my endorsement of that particular commercial product. And my wife, my late wife, in her wisdom, she said, "Your attitude is stupid. Why don't you drink all of them instead of none of them?" And and she was right, as she was usually. And so around the house, we have many different kinds of waters. What really needs to be done, Alan, is this. So a lot of people ask the same question that you asked, and I get emails from so many people saying, which water should I drink? And I tell them that the question could be answered if someone has enough wherewithal and know to do proper tests to see which ones are the most beneficial. Because you can't count on a company who touts their water as the best world. They have an interest in doing that. You need some independent person, or contractor, or laboratory, to test the waters blindly, so that they don't know which one, and test it on patients. For example, patients with cancer, patients with kidney disease or problems or whatever, and see which waters are ones that turn out to have the best results. It's not a simple procedure, but of course, drug companies do it all the time, and they can afford $100 million or whatever it takes to go through the testing of clinical trials of drugs. They have the money to do it, but a small company producing a water that they really believe is good for health, and they have some anecdotal experience, they can't afford to do these kinds of studies. Yeah, you see. And so someone, the government or some private institution, needs to offer the money to the right person or the right group to do the studies. And only then will we find out with some certainty which waters are the best ones for our health. And so that's the reason why it's hard for me to say. However, we've developed an understanding that the so-called structured water, or we would say easy water, or fourth phase water, or whatever term you want to use, it's good for health. It fills your cells, and have enough of it in your cells, you're dehydrated, and also the particulars that are most effective are not doing their job properly, because that water is critical for everything the cell does. So you replenish it. You want to keep a full supply in every one of your cells. And you can do it a number of ways. One way is, for example, I talked about infrared light. You can use infrared, as in a sauna, for example, plenty of infrared. That's why you feel good when you emerge from a sauna, because you've had all this infrared energy being directed at your body. And the infrared in turn converts the water in your body to easy water, and you need the easy water for your health. So that's one way to do it. But there are other ways, and one way is to drink the easy water and or structured water, and that's, I think, the reason why a lot of these companies are trying to produce structured water, because it's good for your health. So this is one way. Now, so which waters have the most structure is probably a good question, because that's likely to be one of the better ones. And it might be that some of the spring waters are good that way. We and some others have tested some of them, and they're all, each one is different from the other, so it's not for sure. But some of them have a remarkable amount of easy water. I remember, and when I was in Russia, I met a doctor there who also was a complementary alternative, a famous doctor in Russia. He had his own zoo in the backyard.
Huh.
He was telling me that he offers 2 bowls of water to the animals who are running around there, and invariably they drink the one that's been associated with shungite. It's a mineral that appears in Russia, and I'm not sure, maybe elsewhere. And that the animals know which water have an innate sense of which ones are good. So I think that if someone can find out which water has the highest content, and there's an easy way to find out. It actually is in my book, the 4th Phase of Water book, which, by the way, has become really popular. It's possible to test to see which water actually has the most easy content. And I guess I would opt for drinking that water, because that water should be replacing the water that's missing from the easy water that's missing from your cells.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I look forward to, I haven't read the 4th Phase, and now you, as soon as we get off, I'm going to order it to read it. Thanks. So for take-home message for everyone, from what I'm understanding, the best thing we can do for ourselves and our animal friends is putting in intention of love and gratitude and compassion and health and happiness, those attitudes into our thoughts and our intention, and put that out to water and to our animal friends and to the whole world in the midst of everything that's unfolding right now.
Yes, and you have to feel it and believe it. You can't just project it without that deep feeling.
And that's what HeartMath talked about, is integrating the feeling with the thought, and the research of connecting our heart brain with our mind brain.
Yeah.
And gosh, I would love to keep on going on this, but we're running out of time. But I really want to thank you so much, because you've explained it, and given the scientific credibility of the importance of our intention and the importance of water in our lives for health and happiness.
Well, I think it's powerful and important. And thank you for asking those great questions that led to the discussion. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I look forward to hopefully to have you on again, and maybe specifically on your new book and your insights as they keep on unfolding. Because like I said, I would be surprised if you didn't get a Nobel Prize sometime for all your work.
Well, thank you. Nobel Prizes are not given for radical ideas.
Right. But who knows? Yeah. So thank you again. And I'm so grateful that you took time out of your busy schedule to share your wisdom and your insights with this animal loving audience. And may your cats be in your field of loving kindness and compassion.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah.
Take care. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. And bye for now. And thank you all, you animal lovers who are watching this, that till next week. And next week, we're going to continue talking about things that can help during this pandemic, of different things to keep your animals and you healthy and happy. So may you all be healthy and happy. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. And bye for now.